So welcome everyone from all over the country to our first day of a Boss Lady series with, I'm Eva with New American Leaders, and we're so happy to be partnering up with Ignite for this. We've never done this before, and we're providing you 4 days of really amazing content and the space to get to know each other a little bit throughout the next 4 days. So for those of you who don't know, I see a lot of NAL alum on this group today. New American Leaders is the only national organization that is training first and second generation Americans to run for office, and we support them once they're elected and in governance. So we're excited to be part of your now path towards office. And again, if you have not filled out the form, please do so we can support you better throughout your journey. And with that, I'm gonna hand it off to Jocelyn with Ignite.
Thank you, Eva. And technically we have done this before, but in person, but this is our first time doing it online, virtually. So for those who are new to Ignite, we are a national nonpartisan nonprofit that builds political ambition in young women who are ready and eager to run for office or to become the next generation of political leaders. So we have I see that we have fellows throughout the nation joining us here today. Welcome. And we also have some Ignite young women who are here with us. And so again, thank you for joining us. And I hope that you'll benefit from this virtual Boss Ladies this week. And with that being said, I'll kick it off to our trainer of the day, Kiana from New American Leaders.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, because literally everyone is from everywhere, so I'm trying to cover all time zones. My name is Kiana Abadi. I am the Women's Program Manager for New American Leaders, as well as the trainer for today and tomorrow's session. We are going to be talking about Campaigns 101, where we'll go over the basics of creating a campaign and what you should expect in a campaign. Because everyone is from everywhere, all of this information is very general, but will still work for any campaign that you decide to join, whether it be federal, state, or local. We just want to emphasize that the information that I'm going to be providing with you is general, just so that it may because it may vary based on your state and based on your candidate. So this will take probably about an hour to maybe 45 minutes to an hour. So I'm going to try and keep you guys engaged, but because there are so many beautiful, diverse people here, I also want to make sure you get all the best information. So Jocelyn, how are we presenting our slides? Do you want me to pull them up or?
Yes, or I can pull it up. I can do that as well. Let me pull that up. Give me a second.
While Jocelyn is working on that, I'm going to ask you individuals, who here has been involved already in campaigning? Whether you've worked on a campaign, canvassed, done phone banking, you can do it by a show of hands because you all can see each other, or you can mention on the chat box, just so I can kind of get an overview of who's done what in all their different spaces.
And you should be able to see my screen now.
Yes.
Perfect.
Ooh, so pretty.
Yes.
And most important question, how many people have voted? Should be everybody, unless you're not 18 yet. Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. Alrighty. So, so everyone's been involved. The overview of this presentation, we're going to start with our campaign roles and responsibilities. Jocelyn, if you can slide over to the next slide. Oops.
One more.
And next one after that. Here we go. So this is your general campaign staff and hierarchy. Most campaigns generally could look like this. You have your candidate, which is your top tier. your campaign manager. You could have a field director, depending on the size of your campaign. You could have a field director, a finance director, maybe someone who's managing your communications. And if you have enough funding, or your candidate has enough funding, you could have a treasurer or a volunteer coordinator / data manager. These are various roles that any campaign could have. Again, this is the general structure that most campaigns will have. So the last campaign that I was working on was a school board, last campaign I was working on was a school board campaign first, where it was just myself as the campaign manager and a whole bunch of volunteers, because it was a very local race. And prior to that, I was the campaign manager for a county legislator. That was a lot larger. We had a campaign manager, a treasurer to do our finances, and a volunteer data manager. So we had different races will require different things. Each role is specific based on what the candidate wants to have done. So a campaign manager is not the candidate, but basically someone who helps manage everyone else and creates the structure for the campaign. Your finance director or your treasurer is someone who's going to handle your budget, make sure that your paperwork is filed on time with your Board of Elections. Your communications director, or your press secretary, if you want to call them that, will manage all campaign communications, most of the social media, and one of the second most important positions on a campaign, in my opinion, is the field director. This is your person who's going to oversee all of your voter contact information, who's going to manage your entire field operation. So this will be the individual who makes sure that the voters are getting information from the candidate, getting their door knocked, helping organize volunteers to go and be on your campaign and keeping them engaged. So this is generally what any campaign structure could look like. Jocelyn, next slide, please. So what's a campaign? If you guys see it's my right, so hopefully it's everyone else's right. If it's not written down, it doesn't exist. So what is a campaign? Essentially, it is your structure, your candidate structure for getting voters to support them in their election. You have various different positions and different items that will go into a campaign,
Can you repeat what you said again? I'm sorry.
Such as you have fundraising and managing your budget. You have field and volunteer recruitment, data management and research, communications, and direct voter contact. And direct voter contact goes really into your field and volunteer recruitment. So this slide basically is what your campaign is going to include and incorporate. And that red box that's on the side, if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. That's a mantra to live by. I have a whole bunch of tattoos that have different mantras. If I get my next one, it's probably going to be this. If it's not written down, it doesn't exist, and it's not going to be any benefit to you or your candidate, or even your campaign. So if you're joining a campaign, and if you decide to take on a serious role, or even if you're the field director, the field manager, you want to make sure that you have a plan that works in lockstep with your campaign itinerary. So this is essentially what your campaign structure is going to involve. How you're going to get in contact with your voters, what your communication style is going to be like, what you're going to be spending money on. That's essentially what a campaign is. Just the next slide. Alrighty, so fundraising and budget. In my dossier, in my structure for campaigning, I find it the most important to raise your funds. You need to be able to pay for all this stuff, right? So making sure that you have a budget that can pay for your campaign, pay for your campaign staff, and pay for any communications that get involved with your campaign, that all is in your fundraising and budget. You want to, as a campaign staffer, you want to help your candidate manage call time. No one likes call time. I have yet to have a candidate that enjoys doing call time. There is a select few of people who actually like to sit down, get on the phone, and call everyone they've known since they were 5 years old to ask them to donate to their campaign. It is very difficult. It's very awkward. And it's not the best thing that everyone likes to get involved with, but it's one of the most important parts of your campaign, because you have to be able to pay for, if you're going to have phone banking, some people might pay for the phones in case individuals don't want to use their own. You'll have to pay for managers, you'll have to pay for data, and your data manager will need to have access to all of that. So some campaigns in some states will need to pay for access to that information. And you want to make sure that you're keeping track of how much money is going where. Again, it's really important. Every state board of elections will have requirements and deadlines of when you should be filing what information, and you want to make sure that you incorporate that into your plan as well as your fundraising and budget plan. Next slide, please. Your field operations. So how are you going to get in contact with your voters? That's your entire field plan of your campaign plan. You have different opportunities to contact your voters. So you could, and especially now during COVID-19, I have to remember to kind of include that into the campaign conversation, because right now we can't go door knocking. Most of any campaign's communications, the best way to contact a voter is by knocking on a door. That face-to-face interaction means a lot to someone. And I'm sure everyone here can remember the first time they got like a palm card, or actually better yet, let's ask that question. What was the first interaction some of you had with a campaign or with a candidate? And you guys can use the chat box to say how the campaign contacted you. A rally on the college campus. I love a good rally. I love getting that energy up. Mailer, a flyer. I've been getting a lot of social media ads from a lot of different congressional and Senate candidates. Not all of them are in my state, which is the interesting thing about social media, any type of digital media. I've gotten so many ads about everything that's going on right now in Nevada. I feel like I should just move. So your field operation is, and a lot of you have mentioned face-to-face, and I'm sure you'll all contest to seeing your candidate or someone at your door to talk to you about that candidate means a lot more than getting a mailer, getting a flyer, seeing an ad on Facebook. It kind of, it directly connects you to the mission that the candidate is trying to get you to be involved in and a part of. And this plan doesn't just work for campaigns, it can also work for nonprofit organizations, especially with specific issues like universal health care or universal pre-K. In New York, universal pre-K is a big issue here. They have it, New York City has universal pre-K, but the rest of the state does not. So a lot of organizations who care about specific issues will do a lot of the field operation plans that are on this slide to get you more engaged. And you can tell the difference between, you get more engaged when someone is at your door or if someone's just sending you an email. It also works with fundraising. And then of course you have one for specifically elections, you have GOTV, which is get out the vote. Quick pop quiz question for those of you who are politically involved. What are 3 really important dates that any field operation plan counts? And you guys can use the chat box to answer that question. What 3 important dates on a campaign are important for field operations?
Can you repeat that one
So
more
you have a
time?
filing deadline, election day. So y'all got one. Election day is definitely important. Ballots being mailed out is definitely very important. Campaign announcement, yes. GOTV, yes. So to answer that question, the 3 very important dates is 1, election day. And that includes your if you're in a primary or a general, your absentee ballot day, and voter registration. So absentee ballot deadline and voter registration, because you want to engage individuals in your campaign who are either newly registered to vote or haven't registered or haven't been engaged in the voting process in a long time. A lot of campaigns will use those 3 dates to really engage people in their campaign and in the electoral process. And I'm sure nowadays we are all high tuned in to what's going on around the world, especially with how our elections are changing. Especially New York, they just announced that our primaries are going to be postponed, so they're going to be extended. The 3 dates that I had mentioned, as someone had asked to repeat them: election day, let me turn this up. Election day, your voter registration day, as well as the absentee ballot deadline. So those are 3 important dates that you want to keep in mind when you're working on a campaign. Next slide, please. Alrighty, direct voter contact. So on this sheet here, you have door knocking, phone banking, event coordination, social media, data entry, and volunteer recruitment. Those are all different ways a campaign will contact their voters. And we kind of went over this in the last slide with the field operations. These are ways that campaigns will get in contact with you to, again, engage you in the process. I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds, and I'm going to ask you to, on a sheet of paper, list out the ways that you can contact someone on a campaign. You have these options here, so see if you can think of any additional options. And when you're done at the 30 seconds, you guys can type in the number of how many direct voter contact types you found. All right, so I'm going to put 30 seconds on my clock, and you guys can go. And I'm also just going to ask, while you guys are writing all this down, to make sure that your mic is on mute so that everyone can hear me and any background sound gets canceled out.
Marrying him because she couldn't trust him, with good reason. He was married when he met her, and she didn't know it. She had found at some point a wedding picture.
All right. So I don't know if you guys heard, my timer just went off. So can you guys type in the number of how many types of voter contact you were able to think of in those quick 30 seconds?
Kiana, I'm gonna switch screen real quick just so that I can mute people real quick.
Go for it. We have plenty to talk about. Alrighty. So as in the previous screen that you guys saw, there were a bunch of different ways to get in contact with different voters. So keep in mind that there are more, especially during COVID-19, and since we're all self-quarantined, we have to get creative. We have to get creative with how we engage voters, with how we engage volunteers on a campaign, and how we're going to keep people active. There's quite a few suggestions, especially as women. I'm sure we can understand the need for mental health during this time, mental and physical health. So a lot of candidates I've seen do, they have a mental health webinar. Everything is virtual now, but a lot of candidates will have virtual webinars. They'll have different therapists or psychiatrists come on and just talk about different ways to take care of yourself in this particular time. One of the tactics that I've learned, I've been practicing a breathing tactic just to kind of calm my anxiety and calm my mind a little bit. One of the other, someone had asked during one of my other trainings, how else we can engage volunteers. One of the suggestions was one of those, an app called House Party, which has become like my favorite app. Me and my family play games like all the time now. So, and they have this game, the House Party app has a game called Avocado, which it's kind of like a Cards Against Humanity game. So there are many different new ways that we can get in contact with our voters. Someone had asked, Miss Yvette had asked, is it possible to do digital voter contact? If you mean digital other than phone banking, you can do social media. The one thing that I will say about social media, because it is listed on here, and like I said, I've been getting a ton of ads from various different people. I'm a very active Democratic voter. The problem with social media is that you can do, it's been updated so you can do geofencing, so you can target specific people, but I've been getting ads from people, from candidates in Nevada and Arkansas, places that I can't vote. So that's one of the concerns with using social media, is that you might not be reaching the target audience you want to, which is really not just the people you know are going to vote for you, but the people that are less engaged. You want to make sure to bring them out. Social media is great, especially when we feel so disconnected, but we also want to use our time wisely. And if there are resources, if there are 3 things that you never feel like you have enough of while you're on a campaign, it is time, money, and resources, because there's never enough of those 3 things. So you want to make sure that you're using your time and your money as best suited for your campaign. And I forgot to mention before, these red boxes are just reminders, but they also include the campaign staffer who'd be responsible for each portion of your campaign. So for direct voter contact, you would have your field director or your volunteer coordinator. So these are individuals that would be in charge of who's going to be outdoor knocking, who's making your packets to go and knock doors, who's going to be the person coordinating your phone banking, generating your universe, your data list. So you want to make sure that people these are your campaign staffers, and they're keeping track of all that information. Next slide, Jocelyn, please. It's funny that I brought up house party. I'm going to mute my phone because everyone's on house party, I guess. It's been a rough Monday, I guess, for some people. So communications. So this job would be responsible for your communications director or your campaign manager, again, depending on the size of your campaign. This is the individual who's going to control how your candidate or your campaign is being seen by other campaigns, your voters, and the general public. They will help you create your website. They're going to help create and send out your emails, newsletters. Again, if you're doing any digital media, anything on social media like flyers or ads, this individual is going to be in charge of all that information. One thing that I forgot to mention while we were in budgeting and financing is you want to plan out what you're going to pay for. I might have said it, and if I did, I'm going to say it again, because you can never hear important information more than once. You want to budget accordingly what you want to pay for. Communications can be one of the most expensive portions of the campaign if you're not paying attention to it. There is such a thing as free media, where other organizations or elected officials are mentioning your candidate and campaign, and that would be great. And then there are other things that tend to cost a significant amount of money, such as a website, such as mailers, and such as data. All of that is going to cost a bit. Your communications manager, working with your budget or finance director, will really have to make sure to keep track of that, because it's very important that you're getting in contact with your voters and they're hearing what you want them to hear, such as, you know, the issues that you care about, how you're responding to an issue, to major issues such as the issue we're in now, which is COVID-19, and how they're helping. Voters want to know what you're doing to help them, and they also want to know that you're a human being. You know, no one wants to, depending on who you are, we don't always want to support the billionaire. We want to support someone who knows what we're dealing with on an everyday basis. Your communications director is going to be the person to handle those messages and tailor them to make you sound like the candidate you should, which is the best candidate. Next slide, please. Data. I saw someone had asked about data entry and wanted to speak more about it. And here it is, we just had to get there. So your data is the most important part one of the most important parts of the campaign. I keep saying it's the most important part because I've done campaigning, so everything is important and everything is urgent. But data really will help control your campaign. It's the most powerful information, the most powerful tool that you'll have in your toolbox. You want to know what voters have been engaged. You want to know what donors have been involved in campaigns and who they've donated to. If you are a Democrat candidate running, we use something called NGP VAN, which is a mass database, depending on the size of your campaign, can cost upwards of $2,000. Like I said, it's expensive, but it's very critical and very useful for how your campaign will get in contact with your voters. There is a Republican version. I just don't know what it's called. If anyone knows about, if anyone can type that into the chat, add that in for us. But your campaign manager, your field director, and or database manager will be keeping track of this information. The information you collect on voters will help control the narrative of what you're saying. Because if you're talking to a low engaged voter or someone who has not been active in a lot of campaigns recently, you're going to need to tailor your communication with them differently than you would a hyperactive voter, someone who's voted in every school board, every city, every village election that is ever possible, in addition to Congress and presidential elections. Those are people that you want to tailor your message to different voters, and your data is going to help you dictate how you control that message. It's one of the more important reasons of why, if you can get access to this database, it is crucial for you in your campaign. There's a question here about more. Julia, you had a question. What about personal safety, both in person and in digital?
What I meant was the rallies. I really want to do rallies to really connect the East Asian community that has a lot of hate crimes against it right now, once it's post-quarantine New York City. And I'm worried about my personal safety, and also the digital aspect is the issue of sort of the yellow book or phone book sort of digital version of that, and being able to find people's addresses and things like that. So being safe with your passwords and things like that online, but also being safe when you're going out.
So would you say being safe digitally? So when campaigns or organizations collect this information, they don't share it, which is different from, major companies that will collect your information, will collect your data. So when you register to vote, this information is available in your state board of elections, which is how campaigns and candidates get access to it. I don't want to say never, because that's not to my knowledge, but most candidates and during most elections, there's not an instance of information being shared or publicized. So if that, does that answer that question?
I think that I meant more because I'd previously gone onto the web and searched myself to make sure nothing bad or strange was out there, and then I suddenly found my address, and it was public knowledge. Anybody could have found it online, which is really scary. And I'm with my family, and I don't want them to be in harm's way. So that's something that I'm really thinking about, is like, how do I get Norton or some type of online software that could help me?
Oh, okay. So this is more less related to campaigns. That I can answer offline, if you'd like.
And then the other one, the more in-person question about how staying safe while being in public, especially with the rise of anti-East Asian sentiment and hate crimes.
Mm-hmm. So staying safe, most public gatherings, at least, and I'm speaking from New York's perspective, and I believe California, most public gatherings have been banned. So rallies at this particular...
Oh, I meant post quarantine. That's what I meant.
So whenever joining a specific issue or a specific rally, there's always the risk of concern, which there's no real way to avoid it, because you're supporting an issue, or you're supporting an issue that you tend to care most about. The best advice I could give is be aware of your surroundings. Make sure that you're in a large group and you know how all the escape routes, especially whether you're going to a parade. Whether you're doing it on college campuses or in a public area, most are police officers or police units will be able to keep you safe. I know that hasn't been the entire case in the past few years, which is why my advice would be to just be very aware of your surroundings and be cognizant of the people that you're with.
And Kiana, if I may, this is Jocelyn. If I may, I do want to add that I'm going to assume that it's the same as California, but here in California, when you run for office, all your information are basically public. Like, you would have to disclose where you live. Also to make sure that you're actually representing that area. However, with that being said, some candidates, they do rent a PO box so that all the mail will go to that PO box instead of going straight to their residential like houses. But it is something that, unfortunately, that's the reality of running for office. When you're running for office, at least here in California, everything is public. People can look up your address and your phone number.
Jocelyn, hi, this is Xochitl. In Arizona, it's the same, where in order to file to run, you have to give your address. And actually, there's an issue right now where a Republican candidate who's running for re-election in 2020 in our state ledge might be kicked off because she put a PO box as her address. So for like campaigns, you're allowed to potentially have a PO box as an address, but not as your residence when you get the petition signatures and you file.
Exactly. Thank you.
And this is Anne, Kiana. Here in Colorado, I think you can, yes, you have to file with your physical address and everything, but then you can add a PO box, and it's your PO box that will be public. And also you can ask for the police, I forgot what name, it's not the Mint, but there's kind of like a security court if you are running for office that you can request that will be following you for your security. So
So see, and we have a large state, various people from various states here. So most states have, it seems, a similar structure where if you're filing to run as a candidate, you do have to provide some personal information. It does that can become public knowledge. And I wanted to answer some questions about NGP van. It seems like the Republican version of that is WinRed. So just to clarify access to those databases, in New York, you have to request from your county party access to NGP van, their version, your county's version of NGP van. I'm sure with what was it called? With WinRed, it's the same way. You have to request that access via either county party, or maybe you can put a request into your state party, and they'll give you, whether, regardless of what race you're running or where you're running, they'll give you the specific information that you might need. It's not that one would have access to the other. My understanding or my experience, that's a better answer. My experience is, as a Democrat, as a registered Democrat, they can confirm I'm a Democrat, so they'll give me access to NGP van. It might be the same way. This is the first time I'm hearing about WinRed, so I'm going to assume they have much stricter guidelines of who has access to that data. But we will move on to our next slide, if you could, Miss Jocelyn. Alrighty, get out the vote. So this is an abbreviated slide version of both Ignite's program and Now's program. So there's a calendar timeline that I'll add into tomorrow's slide if you'll be joining us, that will give you what should be happening during each month, what could be happening during each month of your campaign generally speaking, regardless of your state. So get out the vote. GOTV is my personal favorite 4 days before the election. And it's my personal favorite because the energy is high, everyone's really excited, and it's ultimately the culmination of everything you've been doing to get your candidate and your campaign to the successful finish line. Because you know, you're now, having been alum of NAL and Ignite, you'll have the general information, the beginner's information of how to base your campaign, so you'll know what a successful campaign will look like. As it says on the slide here, elections are not won on election days. I've been in quarantine for so long, I haven't been able to speak to anybody except you guys, so forgive me if my tongue is twisted. But you want to make sure that your GOTV it might be a completely different plan than what your field plan has been for the beginning of the campaign. Because during GOTV, you might want to focus on the voters that have not been targeted, the voters that are less likely to be engaged and to come out. Or you might want to help seniors. Maybe you're in a state where there's early voting and you want to focus on getting people out early to vote before the Tuesday, November election. So get out the vote are the last 4 days before the election day, and it's mostly the weekend before, where you're just 24 hours, all 24 hours, 48 hours, just knocking on doors, making phone calls. There's a lot of pizza involved in my experience of GOTV. Sometimes it's cold, sometimes it's got pepperoni. There was one time where it had pineapple and I was like so upset about it. But for the most part, GOTV tends to be a very exciting time because you've done all of this hard work. Hopefully you've made friendships with volunteers. You've learned a great deal about, you know, not only your candidate, but a campaign, but you're very involved and you're very engaged. And Get Out the Vote is just those last few days of you just getting out, knocking those doors and getting people out to the polls. And next slide, please. So, potential career trajectory. So this is me, shameless plug. I was asked to talk about how I've gotten involved in politics and campaigning. So I currently, like I mentioned earlier, am the Women's Program Manager and the New York Program Manager for New American Leaders here in New York. And I, before that, was the Chief of Staff to a Nassau County legislator. If you're familiar with New York, there's the state of New York and what everybody cares about, which is New York City. And then there's like this little island that's like off on the side of New York. That's where I'm from, that little island. I call Long Island the Sicily to New York's Italy, because like no one knows about us out there, and there's only like one island and it's the City Islands, and we're all just like, well, what about us? And everyone's like, we don't care about y'all, and that's fine. So I started my political career in 2014. I was in college, and what started for me, I had a really great college professor, two college professors. One of them was a lobbyist and one of them was a political scientist. I have a master's degree in political science. So I was taking these classes, having great meetings, and he suggested that I get involved in a campaign. And one of my first campaigns that I worked on, I was a canvasser. I was a paid canvasser for about 3 months with a congressional campaign for my congressional district. It was a primary. It was what my version of Barack and Hillary, because there were two Democrats running for this congressional seat, an African-American man and a Caucasian woman, both really great candidates. But I had known the gentleman much longer, so I was helping his campaign. I was a paid canvasser because I was still in college, so I really couldn't dedicate that much time to it. We unfortunately lost, but it was a great experience. And from working on his campaign, I knew, okay, so politics is like my jam. This is like my bread and butter. This is my peanut butter and jelly. I found it. How do I stay in it? Because I've learned that there's an election every year, especially here in New York. So there's various different ways for you to get involved, and each campaign is different, which I found to be great. So 2014 to 2017, I was in college. I was just sticking to the paid canvassing gig because those books don't pay for themselves. And I was working on different state Senate campaigns. I went to different areas. I really got to learn about New York State. I was in upstate, stayed in Long Island. I went to some city areas. I really learned a lot about politics in New York. And not only did I learn that not every campaign is the same, but just because you're in the same state does not at all mean everyone has the same views as you, which was an interesting thing for me to learn, because there'd be one neighbor I would speak to who cared a lot about universal health care. And then there was another neighbor who was just like, I like the candidate, but I'm not feeling that move. So it taught me a lot about how to read people and how to understand how to communicate with them. And then 2017, I became a field director for now legislator Deborah Muley. She ran her primary campaign in April, May, and June of 2017. We had a 5-way primary, so it was intense. These were long nights because she had lived in the area. People were familiar with her, but they were also familiar with 2 of the other candidates running for office. So I was her field director. I was the person who was in charge of all of that data. And let me tell you, I officially love spreadsheets and Excel, because I had to look at Excel spreadsheets 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 months. And I didn't go crazy, you know? So I was her field director from 2017 until November. It was a really great campaign. I helped recruit volunteers. I was made famous because I found a few volunteers who would just talk to me on the train station, and they decided to volunteer, which I was told was never done before. And I was like, I don't know if that's true, because it wasn't that hard, unless these people had a lot of free time. In 2018, I became her chief of staff after having worked on her campaign, and she actually served as my legislator, which was one of the reasons why I joined her campaign. So I had built a relationship with her. This was someone that I spent 7-8 months with straight. You know, I helped her with call time. I helped create her messaging for volunteers and for voters. I went door knocking with her. So we built a very good relationship, and our campaign manager moved to Alaska. She was done with Long Island, which, you know, it's nothing wrong with it, but she moved to Alaska, and I became the chief of staff for this particular candidate. So I stayed involved. I learned a lot about government. Prior to working as her chief of staff, I had worked in the state assembly, so I was familiar with the state government system to an extent. So now I was just learning it on a different level. In 2019 was her re-election. Her seat is up every 2 years, and they're odd number years. So in 2019, I became her campaign manager, which was a lot more responsibility, but I got to look at the data sheets less, which I was kind of grateful for. I didn't have to stare at it every day, which is, you know, a blessing in disguise in some ways. So while serving as her campaign manager, I handled a lot of her daily schedules. I handled her funding and donations and her call time. Oh, I truly love and appreciate the woman that I had worked for, but she hates call time. She hates it with a passion. And man, I've never gotten into a fight so bad. I'm married, and I never got into a fight so bad as when I had to tell her she had to call time. So we're good now. Her birthday is tomorrow, so I have to wish her a happy birthday. But like I said, budgeting and financing, not everybody likes to make those awkward phone calls with people on the phone. So it's a work in progress. But she was successful in 2019. We had a very grassroots campaign. We knocked on tons of doors. We weren't able to knock on as many doors as we wanted, but thankfully she's an incumbent candidate. So our campaign was a little easier, but I had to compensate her not wanting to do call time for her knocking on doors more. So, you know, we had to fill that gap because we weren't able, in 2017, we were able to do paid canvas because the campaign manager was able to get her to do more call time. Since she fought me a little bit, we had to do more door knocking, and I had to get more volunteers. Oh, Jelson's cat has joined us. So I was serving as her campaign manager as well as her chief of staff. And I wanted to mention this specifically because there are various ethics rules that come into effect when you're serving both politically and governmentally. So you want to make sure that you're aware, whether you're a campaign staffer or a candidate, you're aware of what the ethic laws for your job is. For me, I had to, working at the local level, I had to fill in those governmental hours because they were very specific. It was 40 hours a week, but working on a campaign, being a campaign manager is also full-time. So I had to make up whatever hours I wasn't serving as the campaign manager, I had to make those up because there's, like I said, there are 3 resources you're not going to have. It's time, money, and resources. But I was able to do both and do so in a way that both were successful campaigns. So that there, and then I ended up here with New American Leaders and all you beautiful people, telling you about the abbreviated version of how to get a successful campaign. I think that's our last slide. Okay, no, it's not. I lied, I'm sorry. So getting involved. Now that you ladies and or gentlemen want to have joined us for today's training, hopefully you'll stay with us until Thursday. These are different ways that you can get involved. Obviously, the most important one, the easiest one to do is to vote. We all know how important it is to vote, whether you voted for the first time in 2008 or in 2016, you wanna make sure, or maybe this year is the first year you're gonna get to vote. You want to make sure that the easiest thing that you do is that you're registered and that you're voting. You can increase your engagement by finding a campaign and a candidate that you truly admire or an issue that you really care about and getting people to discuss that issue and understanding your passion for it. You want to show up. You want to, if there are things that you want to learn about, set up a meeting with your local legislator. I cannot tell you how many times I got phone calls working at the office and everyone would have an issue. And the one thing I loved was people who wanted to come and meet, because that's, again, face-to-face interaction. You can really understand someone's engagement. So you want to make sure that if you have questions, don't be afraid to call the person that represents you, whether it's school board, city council, village. Make sure that you're interacting with your government, because how are they going to know what issues to care for if you don't tell them? It says here, become a precinct delegate. Depending on your state, that could mean anything. In New York, I would compare it to, joining your local club, Democratic or Republican club. Find out what your PTA is doing, even if you don't have kids. I have so many friends who are parents, and I joined the PTA because here in New York, if you live here and your taxes go towards the school board, I want to make sure that I'm supporting the kids, supporting kids the best way that I can. Because in my mind, I was raised to believe that it takes a village. So I participated in PTA meetings. I went to school board meetings. So there are various different ways that you can get involved in local politics and local government. And I encourage you strongly to anything on this list or any equivalent in your state that's on this list, get involved in any way that you can. Next slide after that, I think it is. Hooray! And it's 6:53. So I will certainly take some questions. How much time?
We have about 6 minutes before we do a closing announcement, but yes, a couple questions. One question that I saw come up was about how do you pay for a team, or how do you pay, your team members, right, when you're a small team? And I hope that question was answered, meaning a lot of times, people volunteer and they join campaigns knowing that they're dedicating their time for free. But anything there, how do you find campaigning job opportunities?
So that's going to take a lot of research. I do actually want to add to Ava's question about, how to support your volunteers, how to pay your volunteers. You can do if you have volunteers, keep in mind that a pizza party or a game night, especially now during quarantine, is a great alternative. If you are the candidate, giving some one-on-one time to your volunteers goes a very long way. Like with my last campaign in 2019, again, I didn't really have the money to pay everybody. So what I did in compensation for that was pizza Fridays. We didn't canvas on Fridays because most people don't like people at their door on a Friday night. And I'm sure I didn't have anything better to do, but maybe my volunteers did. So I would have them, we would all come over, we would play games, we would hang out, do a little dance party, and then get ready for Saturday. So there are good other ways to support your volunteers. How do you find out about campaign opportunities? That really depends on what campaign you want to get involved with. I would start by looking up who represents you right now, who your electeds are from top down. So you've got, President, Congress, President, Senate, Congress, your state electeds. Find out who represents you. If you like them, find out when they're running an election. See if you can get involved in their election. It might take a little bit of research. Irene had offered inclusive.com. There are a good deal of organizations that will help you connect. And of course, now that you are an alum, you can ask your beautiful cohort of sisters that will maybe help you connect, because there are many of you that are in the same state. Next question. Oh, did I skip one? No. Are there campaign manager programs where you can mentor someone into that role or position? Not that I particularly know. I'm actually trying to work on getting that set up, because being a campaign manager is not the same as being a manager at a company. So it does take a little bit of work. So unless, I don't know, Jocelyn, Irene, Eva, do you know of specific programs that, other than our programs, Ignite and Now? Haha, shameless plug. We have some programs that will help you create your campaigns. One-on-one mentorships, I don't believe that's been established just yet. And please correct me if I'm wrong, or if you know of something that I don't, because I don't claim to know everything. There's no such thing as a monopoly on knowledge. No? If I do find something, I can do a quick Google search, and I will definitely mention it when tomorrow, or I'll send it to you all as an email.
Yeah, the only groups that I know of are very specific. There's for instance, there's APACS, the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies, and then there's there's the Asian Caucus. So it's the groups that I know of are very specific. So I'm not quite sure of a national general group for everyone. And I guess also it really depends on who you're trying to mentor. And so there's also that aspect as well.
Mm-hmm. And tomorrow on Tuesday's training, we'll also be talking about what a campaign manager's roles and responsibility is, specifically the campaign manager. So hopefully, those of you who seem to have had some experience on campaigns, I'm sure a few of you will answer any questions, or hop on and help support someone. Miriam asks, what are some critical skills that would make someone successful at an organizing role? That's a good question. I would say that depends on the candidate more so, and the role that they're offering. Actually, no, I'm not that. Erase that from your minds. I didn't say that. What good skills that you want to keep in mind are, being a leader doesn't always mean that you're the leader, you're the person in charge. Sometimes it's the person that has the skills to listen, has the skills to follow, and has the skills to be more support when you need support. So someone who's a good listener, someone who's a good organizer, well organized. My candidate had papers everywhere and documents everywhere, so I had to make sure that all of that was in place and in order, especially for when we were filing. So there are various critical skills, but I would say those are the three biggest ones. Someone who's able to follow, someone who's able to listen, and someone who's good at keeping things organized. That's someone who can definitely be successful at a campaign manager role or any type of organizing role. Let me see. Kayla, Keyla, did I say that right? I hope I did. If you are interested in working / volunteering remotely on a Democratic campaign in NYC, oh, sorry. can't do promotions. A lot of states. Okay, those are all the questions that I see. Does anyone have any other questions about what we talked about in a rushed way?
Kiana, in the last minute we have, can you tell us a little bit about what to expect tomorrow? Because we would love to see the 90+ women on this call tomorrow. So can you please just let us know what we have tomorrow?
Yay, 90 ladies. Okay, so tomorrow I will be back and we will be talking about Campaign Management 101. So we're going to be discussing the role of being a campaign manager, what your responsibilities are and are not, because although we are, a campaign manager is the apex of the campaign, there are certain things that the campaign manager is not responsible for. So that doesn't mean just because you're in charge doesn't mean that you are the only person that's responsible for everything. So we're going to be discussing that role in depth. We'll discuss more of my own personal experience and yeah, all within an hour.